Can you hear me now?
I can.
Awesome.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
are we live?
Yes, we're live. Just had a
Okay.
problem with my mic there.
Okay. Well, Paula, today we have what I would consider to be a culmination of the last couple of shows. We've made mention, and I told everybody last week that I was going to have something special this week. Well, by special, I mean the topic we're going to hit on is probably the root cause of a lot of the issues in this country today. And the reason why we rant and the reason why we join liberty groups. And the name of the show should just about say it all. And everybody who's listened to the past shows have heard me say this before. But the name of today's show, or the title of the today's show, is 2014 Time to Throw Out the Trash. And I couldn't put more emphasis on that. And we're going to preface that, excuse me, by a few things. Okay? The first thing we're going to preface that by is responsibility. All right? And everybody in the liberty movement, and I would say everybody listening to this show right now, and those who will listen to it when we post it on the Liberty Beacon website, are aware that we live in a republic. So who is the government of a republic? For way too many years, we have sat back and assumed that our elected representatives were the government of this country. They are not. We are the government. We, the people, are the government. We have the power of governance in this country. Those we send to Washington are merely our representatives. They are not sent there to rule this country. I hate that freaking word, rule. And too many people use that word. This country is governed, and it is governed by we the people. The people who sit and represent us in Washington, D.C. are there to represent our ideals and our ideas, not to put forth their own. They're not there to exercise their own agenda. They're not there to get richer. They're not there to build a post-political career. They're not there to make ties with people who are going to help them skate through life while the rest of us are sitting down in the dregs, digging our way through one of the worst economical and political times in the history of this country. How many people in Congress, how many representatives, how many senators do you think are suffering today? How many? Just stop and think about that. They make a couple $100,000 a year.
Yes, somehow
Everything,
suffering, anyone in Congress suffering just doesn't go
it,
together.
it doesn't. They make a couple $100,000 a year. Everything they need is paid for. They get to take trips on planes that are paid for from here to there. They enjoy the high life. They knock elbows, rub elbows with stars and political bigwigs from around the world. They're wined, they're dined. This isn't their purpose in life. Their purpose in life is to represent you and me. We are the government of these United States of America. That has long been forgotten. And not only by these tyrants, and I will use that term, and we will describe that over the next hour, why I call them tyrants. These tyrants are there to represent us. It has been forgotten by them, but more important, and this is how we will start this show off, it has been forgotten and neglected by us. And this is the reason they do what they do. Anybody listening to this who can honestly say that we the people have kept up our responsibility to hold our duly elected representatives in check has got your head buried in the sand. Because if we did, none of this would be happening. I asked a question last week. I don't know how many of you did this or how many of you posted, if you're on Facebook, to your friends to go out and do this. But I want everybody listening to this show, if you take one thing away from it, I want you to do this. I want you to post on your Facebook page or your website or whatever medium you use to get the word out today, a short blurb stating that every one of your friends is responsible for knowing how their duly elected representatives vote in Congress or in the Senate. They need to be held accountable for these votes. We're going to go into the re-election percentage. We're going to go into some of the tyrannical bills that were passed. We're going to go into a few things today. You know how much I love statistics, Paula. So I have a bunch of them. But I'm never going to make hollow statements. And anybody who has listened to the last 3 shows knows that by now. If I rant about something, it's because I'm pissed off, because I've looked it up. I've researched it. I know this to be true. Yes, Paula.
Absolutely, he can back it up. You've made a challenge and no one's come forward yet.
Well,
If you hear him say something wrong, contact us. Let us know how
please.
we did it. So far, not a peep.
So what I'm stating to start this show off is that the biggest issue with tyranny in the government today is the fact that we the people have, through apathy and complacency, failed in our responsibility as the true governing force of this country to hold our elected representatives responsible. Now, that is a fact. Now, I won't make that claim for the people who are listening to this show, because you show just by the fact that you're listening that you're awake and aware, at least to some degree or some level, of what's going on in this country. I would still bet that a vast majority of yous, and I could be wrong at that, but at least a good portion of yous are not aware of how your elected representatives represent you. You're not aware of their voting records. Or you might be aware of 1 or 2, but not everything. 1 vote does not a good senator make. 1 vote does not a good congressman make. You need to follow their record. Are you aware, and this was stated on the floor in Congress, okay, that less than 90, as much as 94% of those who vote on the bills that affect you and me, a lot of times, like Obamacare, they exempt themselves. So I'm telling you that bills that affect you and me are not even read by our representatives. They don't even read them. They're told how to vote on them. This was stated on the congressional floor. 94% on a majority of the votes taken never read the bill. Or they get, for an 800-page bill, they might get a 1.5-page synopsis. How the hell can you tell me all the tyranny that is hidden in little sections and little spots and amendments here and there in a 2,000 or an 800 or a 700 or even a 250-page bill? How can you tell me that a 1 or a 2-page synopsis makes you an expert on that bill? If you're going to pay me 200 and something grand a year, damn it, I better be sitting in my office reading these bills.
Absolutely.
Or I better have a staff that's reading them and giving me all the pertinent points I need to make myself aware of before I dare to stand up and vote on that bill as a representative of the people of my district who duly elected me to represent them. A senator has no power. A congressman has no power that we don't grant them. But yet, a vast majority of what we would call the sheeple in this country don't care. The one thing they do that allows them to puff their chest out and strut around for a few days is they go and vote. And As you'll find out, approximately 90% of the time they put the same asshole back in there that screwed them over the term before. Why? Because I'm a Republican and he's a Republican, and you know damn right well I'm going to vote Republican. One of the first things you need to learn if you're truly going to call yourself awake or aware is that the two-party system is smoke and mirrors, lies and deceit. It was devised a little over 100 years ago to keep you and I arguing with each other over who is better. It's to keep us distracted while they perpetrate the tyranny hidden right before our eyes, right in front of our eyes. And we'll go over that. We'll discuss some of the bills that were passed. One bill was passed, I think, 73-3 in the Senate, which means a vast majority, and this is a bill of pure tyranny, passed this bill. All of these 73 senators were re-elected. This is our fault, people. It's not their fault.
That's right.
Any government which is left to its own devices in a republic will eventually tend to accumulate power to the point where tyranny occurs. This is the natural progression of governments, especially republics. Look at the history of Rome. We're repeating it almost perfectly. Rome fell because of tyranny. Rome fell because of monetary tyranny, political tyranny. It fell because of tyranny of people grabbing power unchecked. Oh, gee, tell me you don't see that today. How many executive orders has Obama signed accumulating more power than any president in the history of this country? All he has to do is snap his fingers and declare a national emergency or martial law, which he can declare by his own definition. He defines what a national emergency is, or the need to declare martial law, not you and me.
I
And
have a comment towards you on the chat line if you'd like me to read it.
sure.
By Chrissy, and it says, Roger, the elections are rigged. Does not matter who you vote for if they have the money.
Well, again, I agree with you, but that's wrong. Okay? You're absolutely right as the system sits today. But did you know that you could ask for a paper ballot? Did you know that you could, in your community, set up a vote by affidavit where you sign an affidavit stating how you voted? Did you know that all of this is within our power? We haven't done any of this. We don't do any of this. So you're right, the system as it stands is rigged. But it's only rigged because we allow it, or we, through apathy and complacency, don't care enough to change it. There were movements in the liberty movement. Lawyers for Ron Paul, I think, is one organization that did it in some places, whereby paper ballots were instituted. So, sure, they did the electronic voting, but they also could back it up by a paper vote. How many of us have pushed for that in our local communities? It's not hard to do. The voting system is rigged. Why the hell don't we hold their feet to the fire and unrig it? Again, the responsibility falls back on us. I'm not going to spend this entire show raking us over the coals. But we need to know that if we're going to change the system, it has to start at the grassroots level. Who are the grassroots? Cindy, that's you and me. Or Chrissy, that's you and me. Paula, that's you and me. We need to stand up and require in our local voting precincts that paper ballots are included. We need to make sure that all of our friends who are liberty-minded, and even the ones who aren't, are aware of the tyranny that these people are perpetrating, and then we're re-electing them to go back and do the same thing again. We need to keep track of their voting records. We can't hold their feet to the fire. We can't hold them responsible. We can't ensure that they are truly representing us unless we know how they vote. maybe 2 out of 100 or 1 out of 50 in this country has a clue on how their representatives vote over the course of a term. They might get pissed off because they hear some piece of tyranny come down the road, so they check on that. It's all the little tyrannies that go along that they totally blow away. And you don't build a huge, powerful wall in a day. It's built by a massive amount of tiny little bricks. Well, tyranny isn't built in a day. It's built by a bunch of tiny little laws that are passed, or insignificant amendments, so it may seem at the time, that are added to bills that over time add up to abject tyranny. We need to be aware of this. And with that, I'm going to switch over to the topic, because with everybody now aware of my feelings that we have to hold them accountable. We are the governing force in this republic. And the blame and the responsibility does start with us. And now that I've made everybody aware of that by raising my voice 150 dB, we're going to go into the tyranny they are perpetrating. And again, the name of the show, and I mentioned this last week, and I told you this would be the topic this week, is 2014 time to throw out the trash. And by trash, I mean these congressmen and these senators. We're not even going to discuss Obama in this show. That will be in a very, in the very near future. Either the next show or the show after, haven't decided yet. He will be our focal point. Excuse me. But let's talk about Congress. And Congress is made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. A lot of people think when you say congressman or you say Congress, you're talking about the House of Representatives. You're not. Congress is both houses. Okay? So let's talk about our representatives and our senators. I want to let people know that when I talk about the re-election process, it's not bullcrap. So I have statistics I'm going to give you. But let's start out with the tyranny that's perpetrated, and then let's discuss the fact that I just ranted about for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, that we are actually responsible because we're not holding them accountable. They're perpetrating the tyranny. So don't anybody listening think that I don't agree with you on that. They are. But we are not stopping them, or we are allowing them through apathy or complacency to continue to perpetrate this tyranny. When was the original Patriot Act? Paula, were you going to say something?
Just another comment towards you in the line. And so Chrissy says, so what you're saying is it is an agreement we hold, and if we stop believing in the construct, then it will fall apart?
Absolutely. What is the construct? I can tell you that, I'm going to get into that a little bit later, but it's a system that is defined, okay? And in the definition, at the peak of the pinnacle, is not the President of the United States. He is a servant. It is not your senator. He is a servant. It is not a congressman. He is a servant. It is you and I. We are at the peak of this government. We are, in fact, the governing force. If we neglect that, again, through apathy or complacency, if we fail to hold up our responsibilities, which is to ensure that our representatives are in fact representing us, we become the weak link in the entire chain. Any government left to its own devices will accumulate more and more power to themselves and away from the people. This is exactly what's happening. If we fail to take responsibility for this, nothing's ever going to change. We can blame them till the cows come in. We can say how bad they are, the horrible votes they're making, the terrible laws they're passing that are putting us down, ruining our economy, taking away our rights and freedoms. But we are supposedly the strongest link in the chain. Right now, we're the weakest link in the chain. And the government is doing exactly what you would expect a government to do when it's not held accountable. So let's move forward on that, okay? Let's start with the original Patriot Act. That was passed in 2001, okay? 2001. And that, because of an attack of 9/11, was a bill that gave the government the right to do a lot of snooping on Americans. Now, it wasn't designed or sold to us as something to spy on Americans. It was designed to allow them to collect intelligence data to avoid future terrorist attacks. But who do you think they were listening to? And that tyranny just kept growing. Okay? Let's move up to 2011. And I'm only going over the large tyrannical bills, because if you remember, the Patriot Act was strengthened. One of the biggest, I don't know, one of the biggest opponents of it, who screamed the loudest of it, was Obama. And I'll have to touch on him a little bit here, but we won't delve too much into it, who stated when he was running for office that the Patriot Act was something that needed to be brought under control, that it wasn't right, that it was anti-constitutional. Well, when the man got into office, oh my God, he not only was responsible for re-signing that bill after it got reinstituted or passed again through Congress, but it was enhanced. A lot of amendments were added to it, giving the government more powers to spy on Americans. Okay? Obama was reelected, wasn't he? We reelected him. And again, I'm not going to touch too far into this, because what we're going to find out is that what he perpetrated in his first 4 years should have precluded this man from ever being reelected. But a vast majority of the people out there who he counted on to vote for him in his re-election run don't have a clue about this stuff. They don't care about it. But that's another show. Let's talk about our congressmen and our senators. Okay? I'm going to read a short excerpt here, okay? In a stunning move that has civil libertarians stuttering with disbelief, the U.S. Senate just passed a bill that effectively ends the Bill of Rights in America. Anybody have an idea what I'm talking about? I'm talking about the NDAA. Now, the NDAA is not a tyrannical bill. That's the National Defense Authorization Act. It happens every single year. It's how we authorize funding for the military and defense of this country. Okay? But when a rider or an amendment is put in it that gives the president the right to indefinitely detain you without just cause, or proving just cause, or without giving you your day in court, or without having to tell anybody why, locking you up and throwing the key away. And along with that, pretty much along the same line, is the president giving himself the ability to assassinate American citizens. Now, I've heard of this happening in Castro's Cuba. I've heard of this happening in Pol Pot's Cambodia. I've heard of this happening in Stalin's Russia and, well, hell, Nazi Germany under Hitler. And I could probably go on and name a few other tyrants. Did you ever think that would happen in this country? Now, that was voted on and passed by a majority of Congress. 90% of them were reelected. Not only that, but it came up to be reauthorized. And when it came up to be reauthorized, a couple of senators and a few congressmen worked on a clause for that bill that would have entered in giving you your due process as an American citizen back, stating that in order for an American to be indefinitely detained, due process had to be observed. Well, when the White House, and at the time they were threatening to, let's talk about smoke and mirrors, lies and deceit. At the time when it was coming up for reauthorization, there were rumors circulating, probably put out by the White House themselves, that the White House was considered vetoing this bill. But when the White House found out about this clause on the NDAA rider, they got a hold of certain congressmen and certain senators and unequivocally told them that if the bill was not left alone, if the clause was added, if it was modified to include due process for American citizens, the president was going to be pissed. And they were bullied into a position where it was never, ever modified. Okay?
I missed a comment earlier from another listener, and I'm sorry it took me this long, Lisa, that says we need to change the whole system. It's all rigged. And there are so many people who are just fed up with the whole thing.
But I agree with that. But I don't think we need to change the system. What you're talking about, I'm in full agreement with you. We don't need to change the system. We need to abide by the system. That's what we're not doing. There is nothing in the system that says that they can rig the electronic voting machines by giving the contract to somebody who is one of the elite, George Soros, okay, and who owns a huge stake in a company in Spain where almost 60% of our votes are counted. First off, why the hell are American votes counted in Spain? Second off, the last person on the face of the earth I would give any trust in counting our votes would be George Soros or any company he owns. We don't need to change the system. The system is proven. We need to abide by the system. We need to guarantee that the votes are not rigged. If we have to do that by utilizing paper votes, how many people are in each precinct? It's not a lot of paper ballots per precinct. It isn't. We don't have to do this electronically. There is nothing to say that we can't hold paper ballot or include paper ballots in every precinct. You want to pull the lever and do it electronically? Fine. The system is rigged. You are absolutely right. But the system doesn't need to be changed. The system needs to be abided by. It needs to be followed in the fashion and the manner it was originally set up. If it is, it works. The system is so corrupt nowadays because of the cheating, the lying, and the rigging. That's not part of the system. That all takes place outside of the system. So we need to, again, hold the people who control the system's feet to the fire. We need to hold them accountable. If we can prove that they're not accountable, then we need to do it ourselves. We need to do the paper ballots. We need to observe our representatives' votes. We need to call them, okay, especially your representatives, okay? You need to call them every time they make a vote and say, why the hell did you do that? Especially if you belong to a political group in your community and you know damn right well that's not the way you wanted him to vote. One of the biggest issues today, again, falls back to us. If a congressman, a representative, or a senator is aware that he gets very little feedback from his constituents at all, that emboldens him to have his own agenda. If he is constantly being harangued, harassed by, and I use the word harassment because, hey, it's our job. If you want to harass him, you pay his salary. But once they realize that we are looking, we're micromanaging, we're watching everything they do, it becomes our agenda again. They realize in order to be reelected, money is not going to work the next time. If all of my constituents are watching me making tyrannical votes that are going to endanger their lifestyle, endanger their freedoms, usurp their rights, all the money in the world isn't going to buy me the next election. And if they know that I'm rigging the election and they all decide they're going to do paper ballots, I haven't got a snowball's chance in hell of winning. It all comes down to no, we don't have to change the system. We have to abide by the system. We have to enforce the system. We have to be responsible for the true governors of this country. We are. They answer to us. They just don't believe it anymore because we haven't made them do it. We need to start. So I understand your concept of we need to change the system because it's all corrupt, it doesn't work. In the spirit of your comment, I agree with you. In the structure of what we need to do, I don't. We need to enforce the system as it is set up. We need to abide by the system as it is supposed to function. If we do that, the system will work for us, not for them. Now let's jump into a few statistics because I'm chomping at the bit to do this. I really am. We talk about how many of these tyrants get reelected, okay? Now, would you believe me if I told you, well, first off, we all know that it's screwed up. We all know that one bill after another has been passed that is slowly eroding and chipping away at our rights and freedoms. We've mentioned two of the biggest tyrannies so far, the NDAA and the Patriot Act. But did you also know that in 2001, when that bill was passed and the initial outcry came out about the tyranny in that bill, that in the House of Representatives, 90, well, the graph doesn't give me exact numbers, but it shows that it is one hair's breadth away from 100% of them got reelected. Now let's go to the Senate, and the actual election was in 2002. Okay, in 2002, almost 90% of them were reelected. Now let's go to when the NDAA was passed, okay? 2011. The next closest election to that would be 2012. This is when not only was the NDAA reaffirmed, but the right for the average citizen to have their due process was bullied out of the altered bill or the altered rider by the White House. And this is a matter of fact. There are many articles on that. All you have to do is Google it. So in 2012, in the House of Representatives, over 90% were reelected. In 2012, in the Senate, all of them that came up for reelection at that time, over 90% were reelected. These are two of the biggest tyrannical bills we have ever suffered. I just read you an article that says the Bill of Rights has just been killed. And it's a fact. The Bill of Rights has been killed. It's gone. Last week we covered, well, the name of the show was What We Have Already Lost. It didn't talk about what we might lose. It's what we've already lost. Our freedom of speech, our right to assembly, all of the things we've already lost. The Bill of Rights is gone. And for anybody that says, no, it's still here, I can still say, you're saying whatever you want to say, Roger. They're allowing us to say it because they know we will reach a point of saturation if they try and enforce the fact that that right no longer exists. But in fact, it does not. By executive laws or executive orders and bills that have been passed in Congress, the Bill of Rights and these freedoms are gone. We have the illusion of these freedoms now, but that's all it is. One day soon, they're going to step up and enforce these bills, these laws, and these executive orders. And they're going to say, see, looky here. This is a law. There's a law that states you cannot, and we discussed this last week, you can't demonstrate around a federal building. Well, if the government's being tyrannical, where the hell are you going to demonstrate? In front of McDonald's? You're going to go to a local federal building and demonstrate. Well, you can end up in prison for 10 years if you do that now. Any individual, I use the word any, that is accompanied by Secret Service, it is illegal for you to demonstrate them. Again, punishable by up to 10 years in prison. Of course, you might not get up to as much as 10 years. You might get 6 months, a year, and I believe it could be up to a $10,000 fine, but don't hold my feet to the fire on that. So anybody who fact checks that, remember I said I'm not sure about that one. But the point here is 90% of Congress was reelected in 2012 that were up for reelection. 90% of them. But yet, some of the most tyrannical bills in the history of this country were passed during their term in office. In 2002, after the original Patriot Act, well over 90% were reelected. This is our fault, people. I hate to keep beating you up with this, but until you're awake and aware to the fact that change starts with us. It doesn't start with Congress. It doesn't start with the president. It doesn't start with a tyrannical Supreme Court. And that's another whole show. If you think that the Supreme Court wears halos, you're going to find out totally different, my friends. But again, we've come full circle. When you re-elect 90% or better of the people perpetrating tyranny against you, well, let's start that comment over again. When you re-elect. Now, you might not have done it because you're aware. Chrissy, you probably didn't do it, because you're aware. You probably didn't vote for that idiot in your district who came up for re-election because of NDAA, because of the Patriot Act. Paula, you probably didn't do it. I know I didn't do it. But a vast majority of this country is so buried in MSM bullshit, they did.
True.
We are a republic, but we elect our leaders in a democratic process. All it takes is a majority. When the majority of this country is still asleep, they are also, just like you and me, Paula, they are also the governors of this nation.
Absolutely.
And they outnumber us. Their minds have been so conditioned by MSM bullcrap and by the money. This is where the money comes in. By the money spent on ads to get these people reelected, and the sheeple watch it, and these ads, they have beautiful music, and they show this guy with his beautiful wife and his kids, and he's walking through a flowered path and telling you how everything is going to be great if you just send him back to Washington. This is a majority of the United States watching this. They are not awake and aware. So it's not you perpetrating these mistakes. It's not the people listening to this show, unless you're some of the people who aren't aware how your representatives vote. And again, I'll say that 1,000 times over the next couple of weeks. Find out how your reps vote, and not just once. Check at least once or twice a month on every vote they take or they make. But since the vast majority of this country is MSM brain dead,
True.
this is why 90% of these tyrants go back to Washington. This is why I do shows like this. This is why everybody listening to this has friends they talk to. You try and bring your friends into this circle of people we call awake and aware. We don't need to reach 70, 80% to win an election because not even 50% of Americans vote. We need to wake up 60% of the 50% that do. We need an aware 20, and you've all heard me say this, 25 to 30% is critical mass in this country. If we wake up 25 to 30% of this population into understanding that our duly elected representatives are not representing, they won't have a snowball's chance in hell of going back to Washington. Or if there's somebody who makes an occasional mistake, but they're not a bad rep, then we harass them, we harangue them, we call them, we tell them we're watching them. And when they know that their constituents are holding their feet to the fire, watch these people fall in line. Money helps them get reelected because of the vast amount of sheeple in this country. Once we hit a critical mass of 25 to 30% of this population, money won't do them a damn bit of good. Ron Paul, believe it or not, if he would have been allowed, if they hadn't have changed the rules on him at the last minute, if he would have gotten to Tampa, and they all knew this, which is why they changed the rules, Romney never would have been nominated because he had the numbers, not the money. He had the numbers. And had Ron Paul gone up against Obama, they were deathly afraid he would beat Obama. Not because he had the money. He didn't. He had the numbers. Ron Paul's campaign is living proof you don't need to have the most money to win.
Absolutely.
You need to have the most awake and aware citizens. Governors of the true governors of this country. Anybody who doesn't believe that, do a little research, because everything I'm telling you is a fact. All right. We're going to go into something else, because I've been ranting here about how these tyrants get reelected. They get reelected because of the sheeple, because there's more of them than there are of us. And they watch these lovely commercials, and these brain dead people soak it up, and that's all they know of their reps. They don't know their voting record. They don't know the tyranny perpetrated against them. All they know is that beautiful commercial.
It's true.
And the airwaves are flooded with them for a year before the election. They're bombarded with it. A lie, if told often enough, eventually becomes the truth. Tell me you haven't heard this before. If you haven't, believe it. If you tell a lie over and over again, eventually it will become the truth. This is why these people get reelected. It's not because of you and me. So money, this is where the money comes in. All right? But it's not just money for commercials. It's not just money to get these people reelected. But actually, it is. Let's talk about lobbying. Lobbying is the most evil that has ever been devised to bring down this republic. If there is anything to prove that this is no longer an operating republic, it'll be what I'm about to tell you and the numbers I'm about to give you. This country is now ruled by corporatism. And you've heard me say this before. In 1932, Mussolini spoke to a crowd in which he said, fascism, and yes, I'm using that word, is better described as corporatism because, in fact, what it is a marriage of big business and the state. What I'm about to show you or tell you is, in fact, the nuptials of this marriage. Okay? And every statistic I'm about to give you is provable. If you got a pen and paper, you can write them down and Google the numbers. I kind of hope you do. If you don't, if you believe me at this point that I'm always careful enough to say things I know are true, then these numbers should give you a little bit of what George Bush coined as shock and awe. I'm going to give you some overall numbers first. From the year 1998 through the year 2013 to date, approximately 15 years, 1.5 decades, the amount of money spent on lobbying, and this is when all of this tyranny started to happen. Anybody who thinks that 9/11 was the beginning of tyranny in this country, you really need to do some research. Plans were made in 1997 and 1998 to move into the Middle East with a massive military force and start to knock these countries down like dominoes, one right after another. It took till 2001 to perpetrate the proper tyranny or the mechanism to allow us to do it. So I'm going to go from 1998, when all of this actually started, to 2013 today. 1.5 decades, 15 years. By the pharmaceutical, and you all know how I feel about vaccines, chemtrails, and GMOs. But the pharmaceutical and health products lobby has spent $2.6 plus billion in lobbying in 15 years. The insurance industry, $1.8 billion on lobbying. Electric utilities, $1.75 billion. Business associations, $1.5 billion. Computers and internet, $1.4 billion. Oil and gas, $1.4 billion. Now, I could go down a long list, okay? Health professionals, $1 billion. Air transport, close to $1 billion. Okay, manufacturing and distributing, $1.2 billion. TVs, movies, and music. Geez, the MSN. Over $1 billion. Now, let's break that down a little bit, okay? Let's go to 2012, which would be the last year that statistics are in totally. They can't be in for 2013 yet because we're still in 2013. And let's start this list again. All right? Now, this would include Monsanto and Bayer, two of the largest GMO producing companies on the face of the earth. Okay, in 2012, the total pharmaceutical and health products industry lobbying to the U.S. government was $235 million. Let that sink in. $235 million in lobbying.
Wow.
All right, now let's go to business associations. $173 million. Insurance, $152.5 million. Oil and gas, $140.4 million. These are all of the companies contained in these industries. But you don't think that these industries lobby as individual companies, do you? A lot of them form associations. They lobby as a block. What the government passes that benefits one benefits all of them. They don't act as individual entities, they act as units. Computer and internet. Almost $133 million. The MSM, or Computer and Internet, let's go computer and internet first. 1.3, almost 1.4 million. 140 million. Now let's do TV, movies, and music. $118 million in lobbying.
Jeez, all this money.
I can keep going. Real estate, almost 82 million. Health professionals, almost 80 million. Civil servants, civil servants and public officials spent almost $75 million lobbying the government for improved conditions. Lobbying the government, paying through fancy junkets or wining and dining or whatever they do to bribe our congressmen, whether it be our representatives or our senators. Okay? The automotive industry, almost $58 million. Chemical and related manufacturing, almost $56 million. Education, which includes our colleges, okay? Almost $82 million. Securities and investment. Whoa, let's look at this one a little closer. These are the people we bailed out. Not with $3 or $4 billion like we were told. There are some estimates that as much as $16 trillion went into bailouts. The national debt of this country is just over $16 trillion, but yet there are studies that show that as much as $16 trillion was printed by the Fed to bail out a lot of, and not only the securities companies in this country and investment companies, but across the globe. It is estimated that number could be as high as $70 trillion. But how much did they spend on lobbying the people who bailed them out, which would be Congress? $98 million in 2012 alone. Almost $100 million in lobbying. Are you even coming close to adding this up? 235 million, 172 million, 152 million, 145 million, 140 million, 130 million. The smallest one on my list is the chemical and related manufacturing industry at $56 million.
Oh my God.
And that's only the top 20. Is there any doubt in your mind who controls this country? It should be you and me. We're failing. And by that, please do not take this personally, anybody sitting in the audience. I know you're awake and aware. I know that you are probably at some level holding your representative responsible. I know some of you at least are looking at their voting record. But the vast majority of this country are not. The vast majority of the government, the true governing force of this country, we the people, is failing miserably in their responsibility. The next time somebody says our government is failing, unless they're either you or me or somebody you're absolutely sure is awake and aware, tell them to look in the frickin' mirror and they'll know exactly why.
Exactly.
The system, as one of our friends said in a comment on this show today, is broken. And the only way it can possibly be fixed is not to change the system. The system doesn't need to be changed. It's to abide by the system. To hold their feet to the freaking fire.
Hold them accountable.
To make sure that they know we're watching you. Paula, I'm going to take
absolutely. Wow. I mean, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And even Even ones of us that do, especially since we started listening to the Liberty Beacon rant and started checking people out and all, I even feel a little stench of,
Guilt?
yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, that's me. That's everybody else. Get me up. Get us all up. We need this.
Well, the people listening to this show, and I'm not blowing smoke up your ass, I honestly believe this, okay? The people listening to this show are the teachers. You've heard this rant. I always dare you to, and I don't mean this in a derogatory or a belligerent fashion, check out anything I've said. Prove me wrong. I will never get this passionate about something I'm not well aware of. You guys are going to spread the word. When we say awake and aware, it doesn't mean we know that there's tyrants in Washington. That's a small portion of it. It means we know we have failed in our responsibility and that we need to abide by the system. We
True.
don't need to change anything. There are checks and balances in this system that are phenomenal if we use them. But they're so buried from the memory or even the recognition of so many people in this country. How many people know that it's very easy to enforce paper balloting at your local precinct? Well, I got to tell you something. If you do that and you make sure you elect the precinct captain, because you elect your precinct, you go to your precinct meetings. How many people out there actually go to precinct meetings when all of these precinct officials are being elected? Only the people who wish to run the precinct do. We need to be at
True.
those meetings. We need to make sure that there's going to be paper balloting. We need to make sure that voting rigging is not happening. It's well within our power to do that. I don't
Mhm.
care how much money these candidates have. If we control the election process, which we have the ability to do extremely easily, they could have $1 trillion. They ain't going to win shit. But it's up to us. You guys are the teachers
True.
now. Go out and tell people this. Convince them that the buck stops here. The blame stops in your lap. If we don't wake up to our responsibility, we can never hold them responsible. Because they're doing what any government would normally and naturally evolve into doing. Look at Rome.
Yeah.
All right, Paula, I think we're almost done, and my voice is wearing thin.
Wow, great message, and you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. We have to look at, and you see that too. You have to look at yourself. You have to fix yourself. Yeah, there's a lot wrong, and we holler about it. Start grabbing the neighbors. Print up some of this stuff. Did you know we voted this way on this?
Go to your
Um,
precinct meetings. Become that precinct captain.
Absolutely.
Precinct meetings they're only a few, at the most 1,000 people. I mean, precincts are not big. You find enough people in your neighborhood, you can easily control a precinct for the betterment of the community, not the betterment of somebody who's got $250 million and wants to get richer.
True.
Well, I'm going to say how much I appreciate everybody who listens to this, how much I appreciate the comments we got today. I appreciate each and every one of you because it is through the message that we put out on the Liberty Beacon Rant and through those of you who pick the message up and carry it back to the people that you know it's going to benefit the most, that anything is going to get done. You are all appreciated. And I'm really not like this most of the time. I'm actually a pretty calm and collected person.
Yes, you are.
But there are things that do piss me off, and those will be the topic of every show we have. Thank you for coming to the Liberty Beacon Rant. I'm Roger Landry. Paula Mathers is the best co-host anybody could ever ask for, and we'll talk to you next weekend.